Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February meeting for SVPMA. Tonight's speaker is speaking on what a Chief Product Marketing Officer needs from product management. As you know, we always work with a lot of different functions in a company, and so it's great to hear from leaders in those different positions and really learn more about how we can collaborate to make successful products. Shobhana is the Chief Marketing Officer of Mavim, and she is our featured speaker this evening. Shobhana, would you like to take it away?
Sure.
I'll stop sharing.
Let me get my
There we go.
There you go. I hope you can all see my screen. Let me get that into full screen. Okay.
Perfect.
So when the SVPMA asked me to speak at this event, I was wondering what the topic ought to be. And, you know, obviously it had to do with product, but I was kind of thinking back and figuring out what would be a good topic. So the topic for today is what a product-led CMO needs from product management, because there are all kinds of CMOs, but I do think the world is moving towards CMOs that are more savvy about the product. And it's my pleasure to be here at the Silicon Valley Product Management Association with you all. I see a few familiar faces. I'm really excited to be talking about this topic because my background really is a technical background, and I come from a world of technology, and it's interesting to see that marketing works really closely with sales, but there are silos I see between product management and marketing to this day. And I wanted to talk about how we can remove some of these silos and use frameworks to work more closely together. To set the stage, I wanted to present a few topics for your consideration, and I want to keep this meeting interactive. So Tom's actually offered to, you know, put forth any questions that might appear in the chat window. I'm not able to go back and forth between the chat window and my presentation, so feel free to interrupt at any time. I'm happy to take questions. But here's the general flow that I'm thinking about. So I want to go through my background to tell you who I am and what I do. I also want to take a little walk down memory lane, because it's always nice to see what marketing was before it became what it is today. And marketing is one of those disciplines that has had a radical transformation. I mean, from advertising and brand, now it's all about technology. And I think you all were talking about ChatGPT in the breakout rooms. I mean, it's the it's the app that's the mother of all apps, I think. And we saw what happened with Bard today, and we see a lot of that seeping into marketing too. And then I want to talk about the definition of a CMO, because that's changing as well. And I can tell you a little bit about what I'm measured on, and then we will get into what a CMO really needs from product in order that the product is successful. And we'll talk about some frameworks, many of which will be familiar to you. And then finally, I want to go over sort of definitions and examples of messaging, some things that you may already know, but you know, good messaging versus bad messaging. And sometimes it's hard to see why something would be bad, but when you kind of look under the hood, you understand why. So without further ado, let me kind of jump into who I am. Shobhana Viswanathan. I've got 15 plus years in enterprise B2B. Most of my career has been in Silicon Valley. I started out as a programmer in India, in Bangalore. Surprise, surprise. I started out with TCS. And, you know, Alok was asking me what got me into marketing. As I was, getting into my career early on in programming, uh, I I found that everywhere around me, there were lots of advertising agencies kind of coming up. Consumer goods were becoming very popular as the middle class, grew more wealthy in India. And I was exposed to the work of David Ogilvy right after my MBA. I decided to go get an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, and I was exposed to David Ogilvy and some of his work. And I was inspired to actually start my career in advertising at Ogilvy and Mather. And I started out in advertising, and obviously I realized I also love technology, and I kind of made that work. So I kind of went into B2B marketing, but I really started my career in advertising. And I felt like storytelling was really important, whether it's in B2B or in technology or in B2C. So product marketing is where I cut my teeth, and that's what I've been doing for a long, long time, which is why I thought um, today's topic of what a product-led CMO needs from product was very appropriate, and that's what I'll be covering in today's discussion. I also host a podcast called The Change Alchemist. And the story behind this is that this started out as a pandemic podcast. I was working at an automation company called Automation Anywhere that many of you might be familiar with. They do robotic process automation. They really look at automating tasks that would otherwise be done by a human, like accounts payable, accounts receivable, know your customer, just really very, very mundane tasks. And I was interested in automation and cognitive automation. So I said, hey, how about I interview some people in technology, futurists, and technology professionals. Then I kind of ended up talking to people that were thought leaders. I've got Jeffrey Moore, for example. I know you mentioned, Tom, the Crossing the Chasm as a book that you'd recommend. So I had Jeffrey Moore in one of my earlier podcasts. So now I'm going pretty strong, 50 plus episodes. I've had David Allen, who's a productivity guru, as well as Azim Azad, who writes about the exponential age. And then I have operators too, 30,000 listeners. It's a great, it's got a good variety of different topics for you to pick from. So that's me. I've got both startup and large company experience. And what I found is that in larger companies, the silos tend to be more between product and marketing. And again, it depends on the company. Uh, I don't have a VMware here. That was sort of my biggest experience. I guess I didn't add that here. So I actually cut my teeth at VMware from 2007 and to 2013. I started out in Sun Microsystems, went to VMware, and then I did a bunch of startups, went back to VMware, and then went to Automation Anywhere and work at Mavim, which is a process mining company. In all these companies, I found that marketing sales alignment was always discussed as a huge topic, but not so much product and product marketing. I think it was understood that when there was a product launch, product management would give us features and benefits, and we would have these meetings to talk about what was being launched. But it wasn't a concerted effort. So I really want to talk about how we can break some of those silos. So, I talked about who inspired me to get into advertising, and this was David Ogilvy, the original madman. A lot of people that have watched TV shows have watched Don Draper as the madman of Madison Avenue, and he really talked about advertising was about the facts. A lot of my people might think, oh, marketing embellishes, but no. I mean, this is where I learned that it's all about the facts. You've got to stay honest, and it's really about focusing on the customer and what they want and keeping it simple. and defining and sticking to your brand. And if people don't get it, it's because you're not reducing it to the most simple terms. And to illustrate this, I have sort of an old ad from 1959, believe it or not. So this ad, really the headline here is, at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in the new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. Really simple headline. When you read this headline, you can imagine being in the car and listening to the electric clock. And the way Ogilvy came up with this headline was really simple. He studied every aspect of the car for about 3 weeks before writing the headline. And he actually gave up this account when he didn't believe in Rolls-Royce after 4 years, which again tells you that he really needed to believe in the product in order to write the headline. So to me, this is sort of a very basic concept that marketing people on my team need to understand. They really need to understand the product. They need to be, technical enough to maybe give a 101 demo. Because without understanding the product, it's easy to sit in an ivory tower and write content, but that's not going to gel. That's not really going to work. But unfortunately, that's not how reality is. And I think we've got, maybe some history will help us understand why these silos exist. Marketing has always been sort of one of those things that's leaned into brand and maybe into digital, not so much a product-led marketing motion. In the 50s, looking back, it was all about consumer goods. It was a little bit about cars. And if you looked at the marketing men and women, they came from these industries. And as we moved into the 70s, we found analytics, positioning, segmentation become more common. And obviously, Apple was a huge success. Even now, you talked about the book Build, and 1,000 songs in your pocket. If that wasn't a headline, what was, right? That was true positioning. And Steve Jobs was the ultimate marketer. If we looked at the 80s, you had billboards, you had MTV, that was marketing then. I believe 90s was when, really marketing came of age, and the term CMO was born. Looking at the first instance of when the moniker Chief Marketing Officer was penned, it was in the 90s. And the 90s saw the birth of the search engine, starting with Yahoo and Google, and then moving on into the late 90s, you had email automation, marketing automation, Pardot that was then acquired by Salesforce. And then you had things like digital marketing, which came of age. And the FANG companies, big tech, has really kind of propelled marketing forward. And marketing has really come of age, both as an art as well as a science. And I think a true CMO has to marry both these left and right brain activities. And really looking forward, AI is going to be infused into marketing, no question. People are already using things like Jasper and Copy.ai in copywriting. People are thinking of content writing as the first probably function that will be affected by AI. But I have no doubt that product marketing will also use AI. And I get questions from more junior people about, hey, should I be worried? My answer to them is, if you think you should be worried, I think you should upskill. So I do think AI is going to come, and it's going to really actually impact marketing in a big way. With that, I want to talk about typically how a CMO's role is defined, how the organization is structured, and what are the success metrics. And they've been changing quite a bit. For example, I will tell you that growth at all costs was the mantra last year, and now it's NRR. So logos are important, but net revenue rate and customer NPS is also becoming equally important because you want to be sustainable with the economic headwinds. So let's look a little bit into the marketing organization. And before I do that, I wanted to let you know that I ran a poll last week with over 50 CMOs on LinkedIn. And some of this may be surprising, but for me, it was actually surprising. I kind of wanted to figure out what kinds of backgrounds do CMOs come from. And I gave people 4 choices because those are the 4 choices. It's only 4 choices that LinkedIn allows. The 4 choices are demand gen, communications and PR, brand and product marketing. And no surprise, most CMOs today come from a demand gen background. That's because they're closely aligned with sales and their metrics are to drive leads and pipeline for the business. But what was surprising is that product marketing is not that far behind at 30%. And I will tell you, I have a fairly representative sample size in my peer group. And what's surprising is that brand and communications and PR are lagging behind. If you'd run this poll a few years ago, you'd have found that perhaps brand would have been the highest piece of this pie. So my thesis is that product marketing and product-led CMOs are becoming more the norm than the exception. And there's all the more reason for marketing leaders and the entire marketing organization to be more closely aligned and in lockstep with product management. And what is a CMO measured on? I tell you, every Monday I go to with a call with my sales leaders and my peers. There are 3 numbers I'm always asked about. One is, tell me how many SQLs we have this week, sales qualified leads. The second is how many web visitors do we have. The third is how many content downloads. I'm sure this, the weekly call will vary depending on the company, but really, I think leads are top of mind for every CMO. But that's, I feel, just a manifestation of how well you've kind of prepared your product for success. Because you can't magically hope that you'll have leads happening because you ran a campaign. I think it has to be part of a concerted marketing plan and a concerted go-to-market. I would say the second big thing is NPS. People are always asking, what do customers think about us? What are they saying? So broadly, I would say leads and growth are number 1. Brand and category success, harder to put a number on, important. Analyst rankings are becoming important in a world where people are looking to them for separating the signal from the noise. But also, I think social media is becoming important because you don't want to just go to Gartner or Forrester or IDC, but you also want to go to influencers on social media that might have a lot of weight, especially in new industries. Product launch success, important, I would say, especially for startups. Web visitors, always important to see how many people are landing in your website, and you can have chatbots to actually converse with the people that come to your websites. And as I mentioned, net promoter score, also important. And if you have a customer success team, they're the ones that are directly involved in kind of tracking NPS. Are there any questions so far, or is everything good? All good? Okay. I wanted to give you a quick preview of my org and how it's structured. It could be different in different companies, and maybe demand gen is called growth, or you have a different social media department, or you might have an integrated campaigns department. But in general, the structure of a team, a marketing team, is the structure in the middle. You have a product marketing, which is the primary API between the product organization and the sales organization. And then you have content marketing, which produces web content and blogs and YouTube videos and so on at a snackable level. They don't do deep content. AR and PR is in charge of analyst relations and PR. Demand gen really is the engine that drives the marketing technology behind the campaigns, and they're in charge of leads typically. Marketing operations report out the metrics on a weekly basis. The KPIs that are mentioned are tracked by them. Business ops is more of a function that's the overlay function for the entire org. And the key point I want to make in the slide is that product marketing is the interface, the API with product. So it's really important that they're brought in from day one into all conversations dealing with the product. And I have competitive insights at the top. And the reason I have that is I believe competitive insights and competitive research serve a larger function than marketing. That's because they look at things like win-loss analysis, research. They're helping the sales teams with closing deals. So I do think their function is a little broader, although they might report into marketing. Obviously, customer success is important, and they work closely with marketing as well. And I kind of want to emphasize some of the collaboration frameworks that will help with a product and product marketing. What does the CMO need from product, right? There are some obvious, really obvious things here, like positioning, value proposition messaging, ideal customer profile, buyer persona development. I would say, and I would posit that positioning is sort of the number one thing that marketing needs to work with product on. And it's always kind of pushed aside as, yeah, we need to do that. We'll do that during launch. But I always think that, product positioning has to be done in the context of the market. And it's the number one job of product marketing and product to refine this and contextualize it based on use cases. And I also think that use case development, for example, is also relegated at the last minute to, for a product launch. In my work at Automation Anywhere, I found that marketing sometimes doesn't have a full under the hood understanding of use cases. I'll give you an example. The marketing folks in my team did not understand how an accounts payable use case could be developed using software bots, or, for example, an anti-money laundering use case could be developed. They really had to sit down with product management and sales engineering to come up with the slides that could then be converted to a Camtasia that could then be put on a, Demo Central and a YouTube channel, and to show the art of the possible. Now, is every customer interested in that use case? No, but I would argue that our verticals were finance, insurance, and healthcare, and we really had to hone in on those use cases. And having platform positioning helped, but really telling the value of these use cases and talking to the value of the solutions was the next step in the evolution of our playbooks. So that's important. Roadmap, again, important because often people are working unless you have a lean and agile methodology, people don't know what's in the roadmap and things get lost in the noise. So having a good understanding of where the roadmap is and speaking to the features and benefits of the products that are going to be released, as well as pricing. I was in a breakout room earlier, and we were talking about different kinds of pricing, whether it's consumption or per seat, or if it's freemium, if you have a PLG motion. I think it's important. And all of this has to be thought of in the context of what are the go-to-market motions that your CEO wants. And often it falls into 5 main go-to-markets. It could be, for example, PLG, it could be product-led growth. It could be outbound, which is sales-led. It could be inbound, which could be marketing-led. It could be channel-led, which could be a completely like a partner-led motion, or it could be ecosystem-led, in which where I'm thinking about an AWS marketplace or an Azure marketplace where you have your products. So as you think about your messaging, your personas, you've got to kind of think about them in the context of your go-to-market, because that's the way the messaging will be delivered. And working closely with product to define some of these obvious things is important. And when you think of a launch, for example, T-shirt sizing it as small, medium, large, and then breaking down what's needed for those launches is also important. So project management then becomes important. What's not obvious in terms of what the CMO needs from product is, trust. I was speaking to a product marketing manager just to get input on this presentation, and she was saying, hey, my PM thinks they know everything, and they tell me things at the last minute. They don't trust that I'll actually deliver. So how do we build this trust? How do we build this collaboration? And how do we keep that continuous communications going? And one of the ways we did this was through regular stand-up, daily stand-ups. The other way we did this is with Confluence, documentation on Confluence. So can we document things we say? Can we have a regular documentation? Because then it becomes a he said, she said otherwise. The other non-obvious point is user persona inputs. I know that product marketing and product management work together on buyer persona development, but when I was at VMware, we found that user personas were also really important. I'll give you an example. I managed the cloud management suite of products, and we sold this product along with our hypervisor as part of the ELA. And telemetry data told us that people didn't know that they had the suite for use when they got the license. It was really interesting to know that 70% of people that bought the license when actually prompted didn't know how to use the product. And we did some further research, and we found that the DevOps engineers, for example, didn't know we had a DevOps product, and the cloud people didn't know they had a cloud product, and the IT manager, yeah, they knew we had a product. And the worst thing was they were buying other products that served the same purpose. They would buy products to manage multiple clouds when they had the product with them. They didn't know they had it. So marketing worked very closely with product management to actually run a campaign around user personas. So we named these user personas as, Bob from DevOps, and Lily from cloud engineering, and Tim from IT. And we did a whole campaign in our building, actually, within the cloud management business unit. So it brought everyone closer together. Just engineering, product, marketing, we all felt we were part of the same team, but it also helped drive the messaging to the outside. And I thought this was a great use of user personas to actually drive competitive messaging, but also get people to use our product. Again, pretty obvious when you think of it, but hindsight's 2020. I'd like to talk about sort of my own framework for success. And some of it is obvious, and some of it is not so obvious. Gartner thinks that CMOs are now being considered more of a chief customer officer. And Forbes has a point of view that CMOs are chief market officers. My point of view is that the new CMO is a product-led CMO with deep customer empathy and an understanding of the market. And one look at LinkedIn will tell you that, terminology is changing. I saw 3 people that are chief market officers actually in my network, because not only do they market the product, they have to have an understanding of the market. So that's really changing. And I do think the 3 C's are customer empathy. I would say that's number 1. Creating messaging in a vacuum doesn't work. Collaboration is important, not just with the teams inside, but sideways and with your own team. And communication, I think it's easy to say that everyone needs to communicate, but I think it's harder. It's been harder for all of us in a hybrid environment. So this is my framework, and customer empathy has always been sort of attached to the product teams, but I think having OKRs for marketing where they need to meet customers at least once a month or partners once a month could be a good way to actually stop the ivory tower messaging and thinking. And a lot of companies just, they're either at 300 feet or 30,000 feet. They're not at the product level, and that's got to change. I'd now like to kind of propose my own model for, my own model for marketing. I call it the ESCLA framework, and let me tell you what that means. E is for explore, S is for strategize, C is for create, L is for launch, A is for accelerate. I just wanted to take a 360-degree view of marketing and how it can work with product management across the life cycle of the product. And this is a good lens to use. And maybe at some pieces of this circle, product management will be more involved. In some, product marketing will be more involved. But I believe that marketing, in particular product marketing, needs to be involved from day one. Let's start with E. E is defining market requirements and really kind of honing in on competitive research, win-loss interviews. And it's not just enough to listen to your gong recordings to see, hey, what did customers say or didn't say, and why did we win? Why did we lose? It's important to take that and kind of use that in messaging and use it in competitive takeouts. The second step is strategizing. And really, the strategy should come from a CEO, especially in these times when companies are pivoting. We really need to understand the strategy before marketing just goes off and does random acts of marketing. So the marketing plan has to closely follow the business plan. And the go-to-market, as I mentioned, is super important for marketing to understand before they embark on tactics. And I mentioned those 5 types of go-to-market. With the PLG, I think super important for product marketing and product management to be in lockstep from day one. We introduced a free trial at Automation Anywhere, and we had a SaaS product at VMware too when I was there. And I think at every juncture of at the free trial, for example, it's important to understand what the life cycle of the customer is going to be as they go through different stages of the buying journey. So again, not to minimize other go-to-market motions, but with PLG, it becomes even more important. C stands for create. The trifecta for product marketing has always been STP, segmentation, targeting, and positioning. And many of you are familiar with this. Segmentation is really looking at which segments you want to go after. Targeting is going after those specific targets. And positioning, in my mind, is is sort of the big 800-pound gorilla, and that's going to be about the product positioning. Think of it as the opening scene of a movie. As one of the guests in my podcast, April Dunford, who wrote the book Obviously Awesome, said, when you first saw the movie Apocalypse Now, it sets the tone for what's going to come next. So I think of positioning like that. It's really important. Personas we talked about use cases. Moving on to launch, which is the L in the framework. I think, product launches have been sort of the primary function of product marketing, but it's almost like they just think that launch is everything. They really don't focus on these other pieces. So I wanted to put that in context. When I worked in product marketing, my primary goal was to have a successful launch. We would launch 5 or 6 times a year, and that would be a big coming out party with assets and training. And, people have used things like reInvent for launches, for AWS, VMware back in the day had VMworld, Salesforce has Dreamforce. Now it's moved more to a hybrid model. And LinkedIn actually has been a great venue for us for launching, because there's a lot of things you can do on LinkedIn, including invite influencers to a launch. The important thing about a launch is this is where sales teams get involved. So sales and partner enablement become really, really important, and getting the messaging right and fine-tuning the messaging and testing with analysts and training, all important. Accelerate is where you are getting feedback on how the launch is going. So you can actually fine tune, iterate, change your messaging. It's not one and done. I think this is sort of a continuous cycle. And case studies are obviously really, really important to showcase the value to other customers of your product. I did not mention this, but a key persona in all of this is your CFO, Chief Financial Officer. And I mentioned this because they are becoming really important as the buying cycle gets longer, the sales cycles are getting longer. ROI calculators, TEI studies, whether it's your own homegrown solution, or you're working with Forrester to put together a TEI study. These are important, and this is an area I think where product marketing and product management can collaborate to show the value of the product to the chief financial officer. Again, a key persona in the buying cycle. And I have the customer here in the middle. Really important to not lose sight of the customer in all of this. And I want to now move on to a framework that all of you are familiar with. And I wanted to bring this in because I do think that marketing is not brought in at the right stage. And part of the problems with siloed thinking could be that marketing has a view of what they should be doing. Product has a view of what marketing should be doing. And maybe we start with something that product managers know and understand. So as you all know, and I don't have to repeat the product market fit pyramid to you, but the bottom of the pyramid is the market, the top of the pyramid is the product. And once you achieve, a product market fit is when really, I think, MVP features and messaging are formulated. My thesis is that why don't you involve PMM right at the beginning where there are underserved needs? PMMs can help. It's not obvious, but there could be pain points. There could be research that point to, maybe an awareness campaign that marketing can run, or there's some research they can go bring to the table. Again, non-obvious, but I think this could be valuable. And typical things that PM and PMM can work on are a value prop development, as well as creating a features, advantages, and benefits matrix. I bring this to your attention because I found that getting the FAB matrices in place and then doing A/B testing on them with landing pages has been super helpful for me to understand which features and which benefits are sticking with the audience, and then fine-tuning it for a larger audience later on, as opposed to going with messaging that's fully baked and doesn't land. I think this could be a good way to A/B test and iterate right at the MVP level. And of course, we talked about messaging and positioning, which is kind of the core function of product marketing. Positioning terminology here. Positioning is the framework your team uses, coined by Alries and Trout in 1981. This really talks about the battle for a customer's mind and how you kind of win against competition to achieve success by getting into their mind. Messaging is kind of what is internal is now being formulated as a campaign, web copy, email marketing, commercials, etc. Value prop is a short, pithy promise of value to be delivered to a customer or prospect. I kind of wanted to jump into a real example of a positioning document that I created with my team at Automation Anywhere. And I kind of wanted to bring this to your attention because this is a framework that Rees and Trout described. And it's been used in most companies I've been at, both the startups I've been at, as well as the large companies. And I'll tell you why this works, but I also feel like this needs to be repositioned. And we need to look at a different way of doing this. Use this as the foundation and move on to incorporate this and evolve this further. So the key elements of the positioning document are as follows. So it's, for, which is your ideal customer. Who need is the business need or opportunity. And want is more kind of the emotional aspects. The is the product. Is the category. For example, it could be a data warehouse for Snowflake. It could be the category. That is the reason to buy. Unlike is your differentiation, and our product talks to the value your product delivers. Kind of putting this into a real example. For Fortune 1000 companies that are challenged with hundreds of applications, both legacy and modern, who must deliver continuous innovation and productivity while saving time to meet the ever-changing demands of use cases across verticals, and who want to create good user experience. Automation Anywhere RPA platform, it's the world's only cloud-native intelligent RPA platform that delivers a digital workforce to empower the physical one. Unlike slow, risky, and expensive traditional approaches to robotic process automation, Automation Anywhere delivers intelligent automation to scale from a single bot to a complete digital workforce. Now, that's a mouthful, and I think it's good as platform positioning, but there are a few reasons this doesn't work. One, I think it's platform level positioning, and people understand that bots are now going to do your job, and this is a digital workforce. But it's not really speaking to the use cases. It's not iterative. So my beef with positioning as it exists today is that, especially in startups, the market is changing as fast as the product. So that's one. Two, it doesn't address the jobs to be done aspect of the product. Three, I think it's platform level. It really doesn't speak to the value of the product. And Snowflake did this pretty well when they started, but they've evolved, obviously from the data warehouse for the cloud. They've now evolved to a cloud data platform. And they've actually taken over that entire category. I have a different thesis, as to how positioning can be changed. And I'd like to draw upon, jobs to be done framework, the starting point for positioning. I was introduced to jobs to be done when I, was following the work of Clayton Christensen, son with his milkshake example. Um, for those of you that are familiar with that story, please bear with me. But for those of you that are not, um, he found, Clayton Christensen found that McDonald's was facing a problem with their milkshakes. Milkshakes were being consumed by customers, but not in the numbers that people were expected to, and they kind of fiddled around with the viscosity. They kind of gave different flavors, but people were still not buying. And then the marketing team had a bunch of data. They found that most milkshakes were consumed between 6:30 to 7:30, and all milkshake sales actually stopped at 8:30 a.m. So jobs to be done, interviews were done, and what they found was pretty interesting. And I think this is a good lesson for marketing. They found that people bought milkshakes right around 6:30 before they embarked on their commute. And typically, the people that were interviewed had a 1 hour commute. They wanted something that gave them, enough of a boost till they reached their company an hour from there. And this was back in the day when they were still traveling, so they weren't working in their PJs at home. And really, I think the milkshake was competing with bagels. It was competing with donuts, with breakfast. So there was an opportunity there to now position the product against breakfast items, cereal, donuts, bagels. So I bring this here because looking at jobs to be done as a starting point for positioning, and not just as a a tool to help with the right features, and using the product, what's the product being hired for, could be useful for marketing. So do involve your marketing teams as you're building out your product features. Um, and kind of want to talk about some great value propositions. We talked about uh, messaging. We talked about positioning. Uh, you really, I think the value prop has to sit in the middle of what you offer, what the marketplace offers, and what the customer needs. To me, some of these value propositions are more powerful than others. Some of them are brand value propositions, some of them are product value propositions. I really like Stripe, payments infrastructure for the internet. I like Apple iPhone, the experience is the product. And PayPal, make online payments safe and secure. Shopify has been a great success too. Anyone, anywhere can start a business. So things to consider as you work with marketing. If you look at all of these, it's all about the product. The product is the hero. So as long as marketing gets that, I think the value prop will be really strong. And if you look at any of these companies, they all have very strong product management and obviously good marketing. Um, Talking about good messaging and bad messaging, I wanted to give you a couple of examples. This is from Azure, targeted at developers from last year. What will you build this year? And what I like about this messaging from their website is the value of Azure DevTools. It talks about how, by expanding your develop skills, and it also talks about the capabilities, which are the new tools and free training. And there's a call to action: try Azure for free. So good messaging. Bad messaging, again, I don't have to tell you why this is bad messaging. And some of you come from a security background, and many of you might be familiar from this example from a few years ago. Todd Davis from LifeLock put his social security number out there, in the ether for anyone to hack, and sure enough, it was hacked not once but I want to say at least a dozen times. So bad messaging, but equally bad messaging could be just talking about speeds and feeds, not talking about the product features, the product benefits. So again, it's easy to figure out what bad messaging is. It's important though to get marketing involved, before this kind of messaging goes out. And I'd like to end with some book recommendations. We talked about Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. Obviously Awesome is a great book by April Dunford. She talks about positioning, and this is a more recent book on positioning. The definitive guide on positioning is Al Ries and Jack Trout's positioning book. This is Marketing by Seth Godin is great. I really liked Thinking Fast and Slow. A lot of people have it on their bookshelves and haven't read Daniel Kahneman's book, but I think it's a great book. And of course, I have a few other classics, and there are many more like Nir Eyal's books. Hooked, I think, is another great one. Build, that was actually a good one I read recently as well. So that's all I had. I wanted to keep this interactive and take questions. So thank you all, and I hope we can break those silos and have marketing and product work in greater harmony.
Thank you, Shobhana. So if you've got a question and are interested in saying it out loud, you're welcome to raise your hand with the little hand icon. Or if you want, you can put it into the chat window and I'll read that. Our first question comes from Kirk Short. He was asking, so how did McDonald's solve the milkshake problem? How did they go about executing on that?
I think they positioned the milkshake as a substitute, at least from a marketing standpoint, as a substitute for breakfast. So I don't have the commercials with me, but that they had email campaigns and campaigns that really talked about, in a hurry to they really looked at ways to counter competition, cereal, bagels, things like that with their emails. And they attacked the competition, which was the breakfast market.
Excellent. Dan Lee had a question, and I think this is an interesting one. When you look at product managers and marketing folks, are the connections happening at the peer level as far as VP to VP? And then are there connections down the chain so that the directors are talking to each other and the peers that are closest to their individual functions, are they able to network? Are you seeing it more limited and needs to be more?
I think it is happening at the peer level for sure. Where I'm seeing it break down is at the like you said, the director and the individual PM level. So the problem is the VPs or the directors think everything is going well, but in just talking to some of my friends in product marketing, they tell me that they are having trouble with their peers. So I would argue that it's actually been exacerbated in a virtual world. So setting frameworks in place, maybe even having OKRs around how these connections can happen, I think is important for leaders. Because yeah, maybe the VP of product thinks they have a great relationship with the VP of marketing, but it's not happening at the PMM level.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. He had a follow-up question. Other than kind of daily stand-up, do you have any other suggestions for ways to get connections between the groups?
Yes, absolutely. So I went on a listening tour in my first month at Mavim. So this was really, getting to meet customers and partners. So for me, that was eye-opening. just talking to customers, figuring out how they use the product and really understanding the product. So if there's a way you can include your product marketing people or someone you think ought to be in those meetings, even if it's, troubleshooting meeting with a customer, maybe they can be a fly on the wall. So it's not like the customer said this, but okay, I spoke to Humana and they think this, or we spoke to Columbia and they think that. I think it gives them a deeper sense of appreciation, A, for the product manager who's solving the problems. B, also, it gives them a little more agency, I think, just in terms of understanding the customer. Because otherwise, it's playing telephone many times. They understand, but they don't really get it, and they don't understand why. That could be one way to do it. I'm not suggesting you bring in marketing at every meeting, into every meeting, but maybe in meetings where they could be helpful, they could potentially also be brought in to deliver some messaging that's being developed as part of maybe maybe they're launching a new product and you want to bring them in and have them pitch the customer, a friendly customer, maybe a beta customer. It could be a good opportunity to test the messaging too.
Excellent. Yeah, I know we've had in some of the organizations that I've been involved with, we actually set up individual lunches that were between the individual contributor level of the product marketing person and the product management person for that product, to just have a lunch that's separate than regular meeting agendas, and just chat, what do you think is going on with the product, and what are you working on the marketing side. A lot of general technology questions about what's under the hood. And there were some very interesting, it drove kind of a bridge of understanding between the two groups and got us much more closely aligned than I would have thought would have otherwise happened. So I
And
think
I would say, Tom, also challenge your product marketing person, right? I mean, if you're a product manager and you think someone hasn't got it, maybe you could have them sort of replay what they heard. Okay, do you want to give me a demo? Do you want to tell me what the product does? And have them repeat it. I often feel like people hide because they don't understand. And I do think they don't need to be at the 201 level, but at least at the 101 level, you got to make sure they understand, because otherwise they're misrepresenting the product.
Yeah. And it's as you said, it's about honesty. But some folks might repeat something that they heard somebody in sales say, but they don't even realize that might not be technically accurate. We have a question from Riza. He was wondering, does your proposed or refined CMO role, does that alter or redefine kind of the North Star metric of leads generated, where everything's all about leads and lead gen? How does that take a different approach to that?
What was the question again?
You had sort of described your take on the CMO role, where you went through what Forbes had said about the CMO role and your definition of CMO, and does that still boil down to everybody's like looking at your final metric of lead gen, or
Okay,
is
okay,
it brought, how's that different?
I think that doesn't change, right? But I think the final metric is going to be the metric. But I think the way I go about it, by really putting the product at the front and center, and looking at it from the lens of what does this product do? Who's my customer? What do I want to achieve? Rather than just hit the number somehow, and those numbers don't convert. I feel like that's the trap we fall into. You want to game the system. Just throw a bunch of money at Google, get a bunch of people coming to your website. It doesn't matter if your bounce rate is 70%. They showed up to your website. They downloaded a few things. I think there's got to be a better way. So um, I would say I have redefined my goals to be more sales accepted leads rather than marketing qualified leads.
Interesting. So that's almost, it's really looking at the downstream value that's generated from what you're producing.
Yeah.
Vineet was asking, do you have any favorite B2B software companies that may be a good example that they've done a great job with their websites and their messaging and kind of who's best to breed in that space?
I mentioned one. I really like what Snowflake did. I do think that they took a pretty technical product and they made it look cool. I mean, they made the data look cool, in other words. I mean, data warehousing, ETL, that's been around for so long. And I do think that in the early days, I was speaking to a gentleman called Daniel Day. In the early days, what he did was they had interns actually have a long list of customers, ABM, account-based marketing. They had 200 customers that they wanted to go after. So they personalized their landing pages to these 200 customers and did A/B testing on the messaging for these 200 customers, and then kind of refined their messaging like that. To me, that was interesting. They didn't have technology kind of define leads or whatever. They actually personalized it quite a bit before they came up with their broad cloud warehouse messaging. So again, I think a good example, I would argue B2B. Who else is good? Um, I I think Databricks is pretty good too. I like what Databricks does from a technology standpoint. Mm, Smaller companies, I can't say because again, I might not be the audience, but I'd be curious to see what the product managers have to say. Is there one you like, Tom?
Oh, I see so many. The ones that stick out in my head are typically the ones that don't do a good job, where after scrolling through 20 pages of web pages, I still don't really understand what benefit the technology provides to me as a customer. I deal with a lot of kind of early stage startups that they may not have a marketing person on board yet, and they haven't made their first hire in that space. So it can be very difficult to like refine a pitch deck down to what's the customer using the product for, and what's the value generated from that. Um, a lot of technology gets very enamored with how it works and not the
Yep.
benefit that it provides. And so I don't really have a whole lot of examples that stick out on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, there are
Um,
companies like Netlify, right? I think they're a Jamstack company. I think they've done a good job for the developer audience to say you can get from 0 to 1 and get a website up and going, up and running really quickly. Again, I'm not the audience, but I think they've done a pretty good job of kind of speaking to that audience, the developer audience.
yeah, getting it. There's that fine line between having a simple enough statement like, we make doing X easy, um, and not providing enough technical detail that you can understand. Well, I could just, if you say, well, we make getting from point A to point B easy, and you say, well, I could just walk. You're not incorporating your technological differentiator. And so there's always that line that I see where some
Yes.
companies say nothing much more than, hey, we're in the category of transportation, and then they don't elaborate, and it doesn't really cause you to have any sorts of feelings one way or the other. And then the ones that start describing, what's under the hood of, a certain diameter of an engine compartment or something that the average driver knows nothing about or cares about. Um, so I believe,
Yeah, I think
um,
somebody had a question about the biggest misconceptions, misperceptions product managers have about marketing.
great question. Yeah, I missed that one.
Yeah, I think it depends on the company, of course. If it's a technical company, I do think when I was at VMware in 2007, um, obviously it was very engineering driven. So marketing was viewed as an overhead. It was viewed as, hey, just go speak at the briefing center, talk to a few customers if you have to, but don't bother us. And then it evolved, right? But again, I think the product managers there were really, really technical. But the misconception about marketing is that involve them when there's a product launch, involve them when you want to make a slide deck look good, right? Or I when there's a sales presentation, sales deck, that's when marketing gets involved. I do think that there's a misperception that they shouldn't understand the product. I think there's a misperception that it's okay if you generally get what the product does, you don't need to really understand the details. I think it depends, right? For some products, you really have to understand it to market it.
Very good. Teresa, you mentioned you had one more question, but I didn't see the other question on there. Or did that answer your question?
No, that was the question. Yeah.
Oh, excellent question. Thanks. That's a big one where you see friction between different groups because they misunderstand what each other's tasks and jobs and what they're being measured on. A lot of groups that are focused on building the product kind of think everything else is downstream. We built it, now go figure out how to sell it, and they don't fully understand the value of getting a customer perception brought into the discussion of what should we build and how. So I think getting that tight connection is key to iterating quickly and building successful, innovative products. Did anybody else who hasn't had a chance to ask a question, did anybody else have anything to add, either in the chat window or feel free to unmute and just ask away? Seems like we're all good. All right, well, with that, I'd like to thank you, Shobhana, for this evening's presentation. It's great to hear from folks, product management, similar to product marketing, has a lot of touch points around the company, a lot of different departments that we deal with, and hearing from an expert and leader on the other side of the functions that product management deals with is really helpful from time to time, and get outside perspective that's not necessarily strictly a PM view, and hear what are the goals and how does that make a successful product, a successful company, and makes work a lot easier, but also makes a better organization and a better product and better customer outcomes. So I'd like to thank you, and this was a great presentation. If any of you have a colleague that might benefit from this presentation, keep an eye out. We will post it on the YouTube channel, and look for it there. And we look forward to seeing you next week. We don't have a speaker to announce just yet, but stay tuned to your email boxes and we'll have something your way shortly. Thanks again for coming. We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful talking to you all. Bye.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.